Tonight we continue our series of interviews with candidates for Boston City Council in the preliminary election taking place September 24th. Our guest is a candidate from Dorchester who's running at large. We'd like to welcome Erin Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being with us, Erin. You have an interesting background because you've been, first of all, for 20 years, a teacher in the Boston Public Schools. So how did you go from that to running for City Council?
I get that question a lot. So I've been a Boston Public School teacher for over 20 years and very fortunate, I've been able to raise my family as a single mom with this teaching job I've had. So I think it's a natural progression. It's for all these years I've been advocating and supporting my students and their families because the school is almost always the first place families end up and turn to for how do I get help? And it's not always school-related issues they're needing support with. So always have, helped, reached out and advocated for my families, not just, the students in my classroom. I see it as a bigger community outreach role, and that's how I always looked at my job as a teacher. And I see this as a natural, the next step where I can support more families in the city and make sure they know that their voice matters and I can speak up for them and they can trust and come to me with any concerns or problems they're having.
I know at one of the recent forums, I heard you talking about the emotional needs of the children. What's not being met with those right now?
So we have a lot of students in the Boston Public Schools that come to school with trauma. Many are dealing with homelessness, and if we're not training our staff, our teachers, not just our teachers and nurses, but even our lunch monitors, every bus, the bus drivers, everyone who comes in contact with our students to look for and know how to react and help a student to, it may look like they're acting out or misbehaving and then they get detention, or it may seem like they can't read and they're labeled to special ed, but what really, we know that stress can really shut down a child. And so to have the proper training for all of us who are working, right there with the students to help give them the support they need. And often the families need support too. So,
well, one of the other things I'm sure you've heard, although we do have a number of schools that are very desirable for a lot of parents, there are some parents, including a couple of people running for city council, said they can't get their kids into the schools that they want. Right. So, and some people are even leaving the city. What do you say to people like that?
It's one of the but one of the biggest reasons that I'm running, and I feel like I'm one of the strongest candidates in the race who really knows that. So as a parent myself, I was a teacher at the Murphy. It was the closest school to my house. My kids didn't get in there. It didn't matter that it was named after my grandfather or anything fun like that. So we were paying tuition at St. Anne's, right? So, or unfortunately too, I see so many times it's looked at like the golden ticket. So you get a school and your neighbor doesn't get a school. And so, families move out, families that aren't always able to afford a private school tuition. Many aren't, and they shouldn't have to. So I think all families should definitely be able to go to a school close to their home that is desirable. And we should really work at making sure that happens for everyone.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Erin Murphy, candidate for Boston City Council at large. Erin, another issue you've been very involved in is help for people struggling with substance abuse. This is a very personal thing for you.
It is.
What have you learned from that?
Sure. I think the biggest thing I learned as a mother of a child who struggled is to just forgive yourself. And the stigma associated with it is, I think, what really shuts down families and to help them get the help they need and to reach out and help those struggling with addiction. I've learned that there are services out there, amazing people working around the clock. I recently shared something on my campaign page about Melnia Cass before the whole thing kind of blew up in the media about, these are real people who are just found their way into a bad place, and how do we help them? And what can we do to make sure that people don't see that as we've forgotten about them? And so after my son was struggling and many years not getting the help he needed and overdosing several times and our family kind of beginning to fall apart, he was fortunate, I say fortunate enough to get a bed at the Gavin Foundation. But while he was on his way to the Gavin house, he was actually in a detox on Long Island the night the city shut down the bridge. I got a call in the middle of the night in 2014 from my son, and it's never good when the phone rings when you know your son is kind of put away for 2 weeks in detox. So he told me he was getting in a cab because they were evacuating the island, and I didn't believe him, and then of course found out that it was true. But after that, he did find his way to the Gavin house, and ever since then I've been a real advocate for them because I saw how they save lives, and not just those struggling, but the families and the siblings, and they really come together to help those.
Well, other than building the Long Island Bridge
Yeah.
again as quickly as possible, what's the best way to help the people there?
Sure. I think we know that if the bridge was to start construction today, it's still years away, right? So it's a wonderful thing that I will fight and work to have, but we need like real-time solutions, right? What are we going to do now? And one thing I do know, working closely with people in the recovery world, is there are detox beds, there are services out there. How do we get those who maybe we see homeless on Mass Ave or other places to know that? And also there's this fine line between, are they ready for help, right? There's a need and then there's the want. And sometimes we need to force them into recovery to save their lives, and other times if they're just not ready, we just have to help them get there and support them through that. But making sure that those who need a bed get a bed, and that the mental health piece, that's another thing I think we need to really address. Most people know. And another thing I've learned is that if we section someone, and that means, the court says you're going to go away, the state says they can stay in a facility for 90 days. And I learned that most people after 20 days are set free, let go, because they say they're ready. But I think we should really push the state and the city to force them to stay longer, because after 20 days, 22 days, most people aren't in a place yet. They're not healthy enough, and we haven't really figured out, is this strictly an addiction issue or is this also a mental health issue? So they're given bus fare, like a trash bag, put back on a bus, and almost all of them end up back down on Melnia Cast. So to force that 90-day, I think would help.
One other issue that's a concern for just about every part of the city right now is the cost of housing, vulnerability to displacement. Should there be rent control, or should there be more set-asides for affordable housing from developers? What would you like to see?
Yeah, so I'm a renter, so I know. And my children, college age now, my older son's 29, but my daughter and I talk about this often. She's going into her senior year at Bridgewater for teaching, and she wants to stay in the city. She loves living here, and even rent, never mind the thought of how long it would take to save up to purchase a house. So I'm definitely an advocate for looking at that 13% affordable housing and development and making sure that that is definitely met, and maybe looking at making that a little bit higher in certain cases, and making sure that we have more lotteries for the middle class affordable housing units that go up for sale, and to have community outreach, like where are these lotteries taking place, who knows about them, and oftentimes we see, is it really affordable? Because most people don't, when they say affordable, because of the rising cost of house, it's still not attainable for many of our residents. So to hope, to keep families, one thing I see, many families leave the city because of the schools, and another reason is just the high cost of living, and it would be good to combat both of those so we can keep our city thriving with families and young kids and parks and dog park, all the things that make a city great.
One thing I want to ask you about is that when you made the transition from teacher to candidate, it might have been abrupt as far as paperwork, but you prepared yourself. You were part of a program called Emerge. What was that like for you?
So after the 2016 election, like being an advocate and doing more than just, being a good neighbor and mom and going to work every day for years now. So I grew up in a family where, we were taught that it's not just enough to, hard work, that you have to give back, be a good neighbor. One of the reasons why the Murphy School was named after my grandfather is he started the first neighborhood association. And then as a young kid, I saw my mom and aunt start the first teen center in the city of Boston. So really taught that understanding that when you help and reach out and build up a community, that it helps everyone. And so as I was a teacher and raising my kids, I also was always involved in the neighborhood and giving back, and had won several awards, one from the governor, the one from the mayor, and then also the Gavin Foundation had, awarded me for running the marathon. I had raised $60,000. But one of the things I always say is, the proudest thing I did, I think, for the Gavin Foundation was share my story so that more families who are struggling know that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and to try to fight that stigma associated with it. So when the election came, and it's something I've always, followed politics and knew that I've been a strong supporter and advocate for families in my classrooms, that I said, maybe I'll look into this, and applied to the program. It was a 6-month program, which was great. It taught it was only women, and it's teaching you how to run and how to win, election, to get you ready for an election. So
I want to ask you about it, because a lot of people can run 26 miles. It's no big deal, but how did you get $60,000?
Right, so that was over 3 different marathons. I think it was honestly just being vulnerable and sharing my story, and just really saying, hey, this is what we need, and this is what the Gavin Foundation does, and can you help me? And people really connected to that, and I think they appreciated my honesty. I think it's one of the reasons, too, as a first-time candidate, people are willing to trust me, right? Donate money and put lawn signs out and come door knock with me, as they see that I'm genuine, I'm working hard, and that I really, will keep working hard.
Thank you very much for being with us.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Erin Murphy, candidate at large for Boston City Council. In a moment, we'll talk with another candidate for council in District 8,